Commander Jin stood on the bridge of the evacuation vessel, his hands gripping the metal railing as he watched the last transport ships disappear into the darkness of space. The massive alien warships grew larger with each passing minute, their black holes blocking out the stars like moving shadows of death. "Sir, we have a serious problem," Lieutenant Hannah called out from her station, her voice tight with worry. "Engineer Kim is still down in the reactor bay. Fusion core is becoming unstable." Jin felt his stomach drop. They had evacuated 50,000 people from Kepler Station in just 8 hours. Families, children, elderly workers, scientists, all safely aboard the transport ships that were now jumping to hyperspace. But one man remained behind. Kim Dae had been the station's chief engineer for 12 years. He knew every bolt, every wire, every system better than anyone else. Kim said there was a problem. There was definitely a problem. "Get him on the communicator," Jin ordered, trying to keep his voice calm, even though his heart was racing. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the beeping of various control panels. Everyone knew what those alien ships meant. The Velcaran Empire had been conquering human colonies for months, leaving nothing but empty worlds behind. "Kim, this is Commander Jin. Please respond." He spoke into his communicator. Static filled the air for a moment before Kim's familiar voice came through, steady and calm, as always. "I'm here, Commander. I'm in the main reactor chamber." Jin closed his eyes for a moment, already knowing what Kim was going to tell him. "What's the situation down there?" "The reactor core is destabilizing fast," Kim explained, his voice never changing tone, even though he was describing a disaster. "When those alien ships attacked our outer defenses, their energy weapons damaged the containment field generators. I estimate we have maybe 6 hours before complete meltdown." Hannah turned in her chair, her face pale. 6 hours. "Commander, if that reactor explodes." "I know what happens," Jin said quietly. "The explosion would be massive. It's powerful enough to tear through space and destroy everything within 100,000 kilometers. But worse than that, the blast would hit the asteroid mining fields where 3 million people worked in the mining stations and processing facilities." "Kim," Jin spoke into the communicator again. "Can you fix it? Can you stabilize the core?" There was a long pause before Kim answered. "Not from the automated systems. They're too damaged. Someone would have to stay here and manually control the reactor, adjusting the power levels by hand every few minutes. It would take at least 2 days for the core to cool down enough to be safe." Jin looked around the bridge. His officers stared back at him with worried faces. They all understood what Kim was saying. Someone would have to stay behind and manually operate the reactor for 2 full days. But the alien fleet would arrive in less than an hour. "Kim, we can't wait," Jin said, his voice heavy. "The Velcaran ships will be here soon. We have to leave now or we'll all be captured or killed." "I know, Commander," Kim replied quietly. "I've been watching their approach on the sensors down here, but if I leave now, millions of people will die when this reactor explodes. All those families in the mining stations, all those workers who have children waiting for them to come home." Lieutenant Hannah stood up from her station. "Commander, maybe we could fight them off. Maybe we could buy enough time for Kim to fix the reactor." Jin shook his head sadly. "Look at the tactical display, Lieutenant. They have 27 warships. We have 3. We wouldn't last 10 minutes in a direct fight." The bridge fell silent again. Everyone could see the alien fleet getting closer on their screens. The dark ships looked like giant metal predators moving through space, ready to devour everything in their path. "Commander," Kim's voice came through the communicator again. "I'm going to stay, Kim." "No," Jin said immediately. "We can't leave you behind. We don't abandon our people." "You're not abandoning me," Kim said, and Jin could almost hear him smiling. This is my choice. I'm choosing to stay and protect those 3 million people in the asteroid fields. I'm choosing to make sure their families see them again. Jin felt tears starting to form in his eyes. Kim was 43 years old, married to a teacher named Su-min, with 2 young daughters who were probably already aboard one of the transport ships heading to safety. Kim, think about your family, Jin said, desperately. Think about Su-min and the girls. I am thinking about them, Kim replied. I'm thinking about how proud they'll be that their husband and father died protecting millions of innocent people. I'm thinking about how they'll understand that some things are more important than one person's life. The tactical officer called out from his station. Commander, the alien fleet will be in weapons range in 45 minutes. We need to jump to hyperspace now if we want to escape. Jin stared at the communicator in his hand. He had served in the military for 20 years, had made countless difficult decisions, but this was the hardest moment of his entire life. Kim, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, it has been an honor serving with you. The honor was mine, Commander, Kim replied. Now go, keep our people safe. Jin looked around the bridge one last time, seeing the faces of his crew, all of them understanding what was happening. All ships, this is Commander Jin. Jump to hyperspace immediately. The stars stretched into lines of light as the last human warship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Kim Dae alone on Kepler Station with the approaching enemy fleet and a reactor that could kill millions if he failed in his duty. The Velkaran war fleet arrived at Kepler Station like a massive storm made of metal and deadly energy weapons. 27 enormous warships moved through space in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the light from the distant star. Admiral Kren stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human station grow larger on his view screen. Kren had conquered 14 human colonies in the past year. Each time, the pattern was the same. The humans would fight briefly, realize they could not win, and then surrender or flee. His forces would take control of the planet or station, strip it of valuable resources, and move on to the next target. Admiral, reported his tactical officer, all human ships have fled the system. The station appears to be abandoned. Kren nodded, satisfied. This would be another easy victory. Begin standard occupation procedures. Send boarding teams to secure the station and catalog all useful materials. Yes, Admiral, the officer replied. Okay, but then he paused, looking at his sensor readings with confusion. Sir, I'm detecting one human life sign still aboard the station. Kren frowned. In all his conquests, he had never encountered a human who stayed behind after their forces retreated. Where is this human located? In the station's reactor core, Admiral, the central power chamber. This was unusual. Kren had learned that humans were predictable creatures who valued their own lives above all else. Why would one remain behind in the face of certain death or capture? Bring this human to me for questioning, Kren ordered. I want to understand why he stayed. 10 minutes later, the boarding team leader contacted the bridge. Admiral, we have a problem. The human refuses to leave the reactor chamber, he says. He cannot abandon his post. Kren felt his anger rising. No one defied the Valkyrian Empire. Then drag him out. He's not resisting arrest. He's just ... working. He keeps adjusting control panels and monitoring computer screens. He says the reactor will explode if he leaves. This caught Kren's attention. An exploding reactor could damage his ships or kill his soldiers. Timeline? The communication system. I want to speak with him directly. The main view screen flickered and showed the inside of the reactor chamber. Kren saw a human male, perhaps 40 years old, wearing a simple engineer's uniform. The man's hands moved steadily across control panels, his eyes focused on various displays showing power levels and system readings. What? surprised. Kren most was the human's calmness. Every other human he had encountered showed fear when facing Velcaron forces. This one seemed completely relaxed, as though he was simply doing his normal daily work. Human Kren said through the translation device, "I am Admiral Kren of the Velcaran Empire. You will come with my soldiers immediately." The human looked up at the camera for the first time. His eyes were steady and clear, showing no sign of panic or terror. "I'm sorry, Admiral, but I cannot leave this post. My name is Kim Day, and I'm the chief engineer of this station." "You are now a prisoner of the Velcaran Empire," Kren declared. "You will obey my orders." Kim shook his head slowly while continuing to adjust the reactor controls. "I understand that you've conquered this station, Admiral, but I have a responsibility that goes beyond politics or war. This reactor is damaged and unstable. If I leave, it will explode within hours." Kren studied the human's face on the screen. Kim showed no signs of lying or trying to trick them. He appeared to be telling the simple truth. "Explain what you mean," Kren commanded. Kim gestured to the control panels around him. "When your ships attacked our outer defenses, the energy blasts damaged the reactor's containment system. The automatic safety controls are offline. One has to manually regulate the power flow every few minutes, or the core will overheat and explode." "And if it explodes?" Kren asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The blast will be enormous," Kim explained, still working at the controls. "It will destroy this entire station, all of your ships currently docked here, and probably kill millions of people working in the asteroid mining fields throughout this system." Kren's tactical officer quickly ran calculations on his computer. After a few minutes, he looked up with concern. "Admiral, our sensors confirm that the reactor is indeed unstable. If it explodes, the blast radius would include our entire fleet." Bridge fell silent as the implications became clear. This one human was not just protecting the station or the mining workers. He was protecting the Velcaran fleet as well. "You would save your enemies?" Kren asked, genuinely puzzled by this concept. Kim paused in his work and looked directly at the camera again. "You're not my enemies right now, Admiral. Right now, you're people who will die if this reactor explodes. That's all that matters to me." Several Velcaran officers exchanged confused glances. In their culture, enemies were enemies. The idea of protecting those who had conquered you was completely foreign to them. "I do not understand," Kren admitted. "We have taken your station. We have driven away your people. We are your conquerors, but you care if we live or die." Kim's hands never stopped moving across the control panels, but his voice remained patient and calm. "'Cause you're alive, Admiral. All of your soldiers, all of your crew members, they're living beings with families and friends who care about them. I won't let millions of people die just because our governments are at war." "You would sacrifice your own life for strangers?" Kren asked. "Yes," Kim replied without hesitation. "Okay, it's the right thing to do." Admiral Kren stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to understand this human who defied everything he thought he knew about his enemies. 5 days had passed since the Velcaran fleet arrived at Kepler Station. Kim Day had not left the reactor chamber once during that time, working around the clock to keep the unstable fusion core from exploding. He took short naps in a chair next to the main control panel, always waking up every hour to check the power readings and make necessary adjustments. Admiral Kren had ordered his best engineers to study the reactor and confirm Kim's claims about the danger. After 2 days of careful analysis, Chief Engineer Voth reported back with the disturbing news. "Admiral, the human is telling the truth," Voth said during a private meeting. "The reactor containment field is barely holding. If he stops monitoring it manually, we estimate complete meltdown within 3 to 4 hours. Explosion would destroy our entire fleet and everything else within 100,000 kilometers." Kren felt frustrated and confused. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a situation like this. His enemy was also his protector, and killing Kim would mean destroying himself and his entire crew. Commander Nara, Kryn's tactical officer, had begun visiting Kim daily. What started as simple interrogation sessions to gather intelligence had slowly turned into something neither of them expected: actual conversations. "I still do not understand why you help us," Nara said during her third visit, standing near the reactor chamber's entrance while Kim worked at the control panels. Kim paused in his adjustments and looked at her. Even after 5 days of constant work, his hands remained steady and his voice stayed calm. "Because you're alive, Commander. That matters more than anything else." "We are your enemies," Nara pointed out. "We conquered your station. We drove away your people. We would have enslaved or killed you if circumstances were different." Kim nodded thoughtfully while continuing to monitor the reactor readings. "Right now, we're just people trying not to die, seeing what hatred does to societies. Commander, I've studied the wars in human history. Hatred only creates more enemies, more suffering, more death. Someone has to choose to break that cycle." Nara found herself staying longer during each visit. She began bringing Kim food from the ship's supplies and basic medical equipment to help him stay healthy. Kim ate gratefully and always thanked her politely, treating her not as a conqueror, but simply as another person. During these conversations, Kim spoke about his life before the war. He told Nara about his wife Sumin, who taught children at the colony school, and his 2 daughters, aged 8 and 12, who loved to build robots from spare electronic parts. He described his dream of peaceful space exploration, of humans and aliens working together to discover new worlds and share knowledge. "What about your people?" Kim asked during one conversation. "Kay, do you have family back home, Kay?" Nara was surprised by the question. No human prisoner had ever asked about her personal life before. "I have a younger brother who serves on a patrol ship in the outer territories. My parents live on our homeworld, managing a food production facility." "Do you miss them?" Kim asked while adjusting the reactor's cooling system. "Yes," Nara admitted, though she had never spoken about such feelings to anyone before. "Military service keeps us away from home for years at a time." Kim smiled sadly. "I miss my family too. But I hope they understand why I had to stay. I hope they're proud that I chose to protect people instead of seeking revenge." Word of these conversations spread through the Valkyran fleet. Other soldiers began visiting the reactor chamber out of curiosity. Kim welcomed each visitor with the same calm politeness, answering their questions about human culture and asking about their own lives in return. Engineer Do, a young Valkyran who had joined the fleet only months earlier, was particularly fascinated by Kim's stories of human cooperation. Kim told him about disaster relief efforts where strangers traveled across the galaxy to help people they had never met, about scientific collaborations between different human colonies, about communities that shared resources freely during difficult times. "Your people fight each other too, don't they?" Dole observed during one visit. "We have studied your history. Humans have had many wars." Kim nodded sadly while checking the reactor's pressure readings. "Yes, we do fight sometimes. Quaint mistakes. We let fear and anger control us. But we're learning from those mistakes. We're trying to be better than we were yesterday." "How do you learn to be better?" Dole asked, genuinely curious. By choosing to help instead of hurt," Kim explained. By listening to people who are different from us. By remembering that everyone wants the same basic things: safety for their families, food to eat, a chance to build something meaningful with their lives." These ideas were completely foreign to the Valkyran Empire, which had built its entire civilization around conquest and domination. Yet Kim's words seemed to make sense to many of the soldiers who visited him. Admiral Kren watched these interactions through security cameras, growing more uncomfortable each day. His soldiers were supposed to be hardened warriors, focused only on victory and expansion, but he could see them changing as they spent time with Kim. They asked fewer questions about military tactics and more questions about philosophy and ethics. Some soldiers began bringing Kim small gifts, extra food, better bedding, books from the ship's library. They started calling him by his name instead of just the human prisoner. A few even began helping him with simple maintenance tasks around the reactor chamber. Kran realized that Kim was doing something no enemy had ever done before. Without weapons or threats or promises of reward, he was changing the hearts and minds of Velgaron soldiers simply by treating them with kindness and respect. The Admiral wondered if this one human might be more dangerous to the Empire than an entire fleet of warships. On the 10th day, Kim Day finally collapsed. He had been working continuously for over 200 hours, taking only short naps and eating small meals while never leaving his post at the reactor controls. His body simply could not continue any longer. Engineer Dole was visiting the reactor chamber when it happened. He watched in horror as Kim suddenly swayed on his feet, his hands slipping from the control panel, and then fell unconscious to the floor. Alarms immediately began blaring throughout the station as the reactor's power levels started climbing dangerously high. It's a medical emergency in the reactor chamber. Dole shouted into his communicator while rushing to Kim's side. The human has collapsed. Within minutes, Velgaron medics arrived with emergency equipment. But they faced a terrible problem. They needed to save Kim's life while also preventing the reactor from exploding. Dr. Van Deed's chief medical officer knelt beside Kim's unconscious form while Dole frantically tried to operate the reactor controls. His body is completely exhausted, Dr. Van reported. Severe dehydration, lack of sleep, extreme stress. He needs immediate treatment, but I cannot move him from this chamber. The reactor levels are rising too fast, Dole said desperately, his hands shaking as he tried to adjust the controls the way Kim had taught him. I can stabilize it for a few minutes, but I don't understand all the systems like he does. Admiral Kren arrived at the reactor chamber within 10 minutes, followed by Commander Nara and several other senior officers. They found the medics treating Kim while he remained unconscious on the floor, 4 tubes running into his arms and monitoring equipment attached to his chest. What is his condition? Kran asked Dr. Van. He will live, but he needs several hours of medical treatment and rest, the doctor replied. However, if we move him from this location, who will operate the reactor? Dole looked up from the control panel, sweat covering his face from the stress of trying to manage the complex systems. Admiral, I've been learning from him for the past few days. I can handle the basic operations, but there are dozens of subsystems that require constant adjustment. I need help. Get every engineer we have down here immediately, Kren ordered. Whatever it takes to keep this reactor stable. As the Velgaron medical team worked to save Kim's life, their engineers studied the reactor controls he had been operating single-handedly for 10 days. They were amazed by the complexity of what Kim had been doing. The fusion reactor required adjustments every few minutes, balancing power output, cooling systems, containment fields, and dozens of other variables. How did one person manage all of this? Asked Chief Engineer Voth, staring at the bewildering array of controls and displays. He never stopped working, Dole explained quietly. I watched him. Even when he was eating or resting, his eyes were always on these screens. He knew exactly when each system needed adjustment. Dr. Van looked up from treating Kim. His medical readings show he has been under extreme physical stress for days. His body was operating on pure determination and willpower. Commander Nar knelt beside Kim's unconscious form, watching the medical monitors show his slow but steady heartbeat. Something had changed inside her during the past 10 days of conversations with this human. She had begun to question everything she had believed about strength, about conquest, about what it meant to be powerful. "Admiral," she said, during a private moment with Kren, "I need to speak with you about something important." They stepped outside the reactor chamber, leaving the medical team and engineers to continue their work. "What is it, Commander?" Kren asked. Nara looked back toward the chamber where Kim lay unconscious, surrounded by Velkaran soldiers who were now working desperately to save his life. "What if we have been wrong about everything? What if strength is not about taking what we want from others?" Kren frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look at what happened here," Nara said. "Kim had the perfect opportunity to destroy our entire fleet. He could have sabotaged the reactor, killed all of us, and been remembered as a hero who stopped the Velkaran invasion. Instead, he chose to protect us. He chose to save the lives of his enemies." "He is just one person," Kren replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "One person who showed more courage than our entire fleet," Nara continued. "He faced death alone, worked for 10 days without rest, and never once asked for anything in return except that we let him continue protecting everyone. Is that not true strength?" Admiral Kren stared at the tactical display on his portable device, which showed Kim's vital signs slowly improving under medical treatment. One fragile human life, holding back catastrophe through sheer determination and selflessness. "He is changing us," Kren admitted quietly. "I can see it in the soldiers. They look at him differently now. They look at themselves differently. They are learning that there might be another way to live," Nara said. "A way that does not require conquering and destroying others to prove our worth." Back in the reactor chamber, Kim slowly regained consciousness. The first thing he saw was Engineer Dole working at the control panel, carefully adjusting the reactor settings while Dr. Venn monitored his medical condition. "The reactor, ... double quotes," Kim whispered weakly. "Stable," Dole assured him with a smile. "We have 6 engineers working in shifts now. You taught us well." Kim looked around the chamber and saw Velkaran medics checking his condition, engineers studying the control systems, and soldiers standing guard, not as captors, but as protectors. Something fundamental had changed during his unconsciousness. "You saved my life," Kim said to Dr. Venn. "You saved all our lives first," the doctor replied. It seemed only fair to return the favor. As Kim slowly recovered his strength, he realized that the Velkaran soldiers were no longer treating him as a prisoner. They had become partners in survival, working together to prevent disaster and protect the millions of people throughout the system. One person's choice to show compassion had begun to transform an entire military fleet. 3 weeks after the Velkaran fleet arrived at Kepler Station, long-range sensors detected the return of the Terran Defense Fleet. Commander Jin led a massive armada of 42 warships, expecting to find either a destroyed station or a heavily fortified enemy position that would require a costly battle to retake. Instead, its tactical officers reported something that made no sense at all. "Commander," reported Lieutenant Hannah from her station, "the Velkaran ships are not in attack formation. They appear to be protecting the station." Jin stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The enemy warships were arranged in a defensive circle around Kepler Station, their weapons powered down, their shields at minimum levels. It looked more like a protective escort than an occupying force. "Are our sensors malfunctioning?" Jin asked. "No, sir. All readings are accurate," Hannah replied. "The Velkaran fleet is definitely in a protective formation, and Commander ... we're receiving a transmission from their flagship." Jin's heart began racing. In 3 weeks, he had prepared himself for the worst possible news about Kim Dae. He expected to find his engineer either dead or captured, and the station either destroyed or stripped of all valuable resources. Put the transmission on the main screen. Skin ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Velcaron warship. But what Jin saw made him question whether he was dreaming. Standing side by side were Admiral Kryn, the Velcaron commander, and Kim Day, very much alive and apparently unharmed. "This is Admiral Kryn of the Velcaron Empire," came the calm voice through the translation system. "I am transmitting to both the Terran Defense Fleet and my own ships. We request an immediate ceasefire from all parties. We have an important proposal to discuss." Jin found himself unable to speak for several seconds. Kim looked thinner than before, clearly tired from his ordeal, but he stood straight and seemed to be there by his own choice rather than as a prisoner. "Commander Jin," Kim's familiar voice came through the speakers. "It's good to see you again. These people want to talk, really talk, about peace." The bridge of Jin's flagship fell completely silent. Every officer stared at the screen, trying to understand what they were seeing. The man they had left behind to die was standing next to their enemy's leader, talking about peace negotiations. "Kim," Jin said finally, "are you, ... are you all right? Are you being forced to say this?" Kim smiled, the same calm expression Jin remembered from their last conversation 3 weeks ago. "I'm fine, Commander. Tired, but fine. And no, nobody is forcing me to do anything. Admiral Kryn and his people have treated me well. More than well, actually." Admiral Kryn stepped forward on the screen. "Commander Jin, I understand your confusion. 3 weeks ago, my fleet came here to conquer this station and claim it for our empire. But your engineer, Kim Day, showed us something we had never seen before." Jin looked at his own officers, all of whom seemed as bewildered as he felt. "What did he show you?" "That true strength comes from protecting others, not destroying them," Kryn replied. "He could have sabotaged our ships. He could have let the reactor explode and killed us all, becoming a hero to your people. Instead, he chose to save our lives, along with millions of innocent civilians." Over the next hour, Admiral Kryn explained everything that had happened. He told Jin about Kim's choice to stay and manually operate the damaged reactor. He described how Kim had worked for 10 days, without rest, protecting not only the mining colonies, but also the Velcaron fleet itself. He spoke about the conversations between Kim and the Velcaron soldiers, and how those conversations had changed their understanding of what it meant to be strong. "My soldiers have learned something important from your engineer," Kryn said. "Have learned that courage is not about defeating enemies. Courage is about protecting life, even when that life belongs to someone who is trying to harm you." Steen listened in amazement as Kryn proposed something that had never happened in the history of the Velcaron Empire: a complete ceasefire, an end to their expansion and conquest, cultural exchange programs between their civilizations, peace talks that could lead to a permanent treaty. "Why?" Jin asked. "Why would your empire agree to this?" Kryn looked at Kim, who nodded encouragingly. "Because one human showed us a better way to live. He showed us that we could be strong without being cruel. We could be powerful without destroying others. My people want to learn more about this different kind of strength." Peace negotiations took place on Kepler Station itself, in the same reactor chamber where Kim had kept his lonely vigil. Representatives from both governments arrived within days, and the talks continued for 2 weeks. Jin watched Kim during the negotiations, seeing how the Velcaron delegates treated him with obvious respect and affection. Commander Nara, who had been appointed as the first Velcaron ambassador to Earth, often asked Kim for his opinions on various proposals. "You stayed behind to save lives," Jin said to Kim during a private moment. "It seems you saved much more than just lives." Kim looked around the reactor chamber, where human and Velcaron engineers now worked together to operate the complex systems. The fusion core was finally stable, protected by technology from both civilizations. "I just did what needed to be done," Kim replied quietly. They did the rest. They chose to listen. They chose to change. The treaty was signed on the spot where Kim had collapsed from exhaustion 2 weeks earlier. The Velcaron Empire agreed to stop all military expansion and begin peaceful exchanges with human colonies. They would share technology, knowledge, and culture instead of taking what they wanted by force. As the ceremony concluded, Kim finally stepped away from the reactor control panel for the first time in over a month. Human and Velcaron engineers would continue operating it together, using combined technology that was more advanced than either civilization could have created alone. Commander Nara approached Kim as the diplomats celebrated their historic agreement. Thank you, she said simply. Kim smiled, the same calm expression he had worn throughout his entire ordeal. Thank you for listening. As he watched the former enemies working together, Kim realized that his choice to stay behind had accomplished something he never could have imagined. It had not just prevented a disaster or saved lives. It had changed the entire galaxy, proving that sometimes one person's compassion could transform the hearts of entire civilizations.